The Wild West, the place where brave cowboys, outlaws, and lawmen engaged in daily shootouts, where raids and robberies were always just around the corner. But this romanticized narrative from Hollywood doesn't really paint the full picture. There were many other so-called activities during the Wild West era that would be considered horrific by today's standards. So join us today as we uncover the diabolical secrets of the frontier, where scalpings and ruthless outlaws reigned supreme, and justice was served by the hangman's noose. The Wild West was always a place where public executions cast a haunting shadow over the communities. Hangings and lynchings served as terrifying spectacles of mob justice, and the gallows reminded everyone of the consequences that awaited those who dared to defy the law. The impact of this on the community was intense. Fear and anxiety gripped the hearts of townsfolk, creating a climate of vigilante justice. These acts were supposed to maintain order, but they revealed the darker side of humanity. Hangings and lynchings were not the only means of punishment, but were chilling displays of lawlessness and raw justice. With limited law enforcement available, locals took it upon themselves to ensure their safety and maintain order. In settlements and towns, militias and ad hoc squads were formed. The idea that captured bandits were taken to major cities for a fair trial was nothing more than a myth. No ceremony awaited the criminals who fell into the hands of these vigilantes. Punishments were quick, brutal, with no mercy or ethics. In fact, the most fortunate among them faced the public hangings. History recounts the case of a captured murderer whose body was transformed into a haunting souvenir. The locals first hanged the bandit, then proceeded to peel his skin, dressing it and cutting it into pieces, creating a limited edition collection of gruesome artifacts. But even these acts were not the extent of the horrors. Depending on the cultural diversity of the settler population, the fate of a criminal could vary because each culture had its own traditions. Some did staking, stoning, or even burning. Moreover, official prisons did little to guarantee a reasonable death for the guilty. Locals, instead of waiting for a trial, took matters into their own hands. They stormed prisons, dragging out the criminal and carrying their own form of justice, discarding the law and the official proceedings. In this Wild West, intolerance thrived as well. Those who followed a different religion than the prevalent one in their town or city were looked upon as second-class citizens. A Catholic or a Jew in a Protestant town faced not only social exclusion, but also the possibility of meeting a violent end. But it wasn't just the hangings that spread fear through the people. In the Wild West, stereotypes and misconceptions often overshadowed the truth. Contrary to popular belief, it was not the Native Americans who initiated brutal attacks on the settlers, but rather the settlers themselves who started the violence. In reality, Native American tribes were not as violent as portrayed in movies and folklore. They valued a peaceful existence and engaged in trade rather than warfare. Scalping, a gruesome practice where the scalp of the victim was removed, became a twisted proof of bravery and dominance. Bounty hunters were hired by local white settlers to clear territories of Native American tribes, often driven by a policy of genocide. To prove their exploits and claim their rewards, these hunters needed physical evidence, and thus the gruesome practice of scalping emerged. For a sum of about $25 per scalp, these bounty hunters would bring back the scalps of Native Americans they claimed to have killed, and then the scalps became a horrific form of proof. Shockingly, over time, even some Native Americans themselves adopted this horrifying tradition, offering the scalps of murdered white men as offerings to their own gods. As tensions rose and troops were deployed to suppress Native American resistance, the practice of scalping increased in the Wild West. As it was the settlers themselves who had initiated this diabolical tradition, this only further escalated tensions between the different groups. Furthermore, into the Wild West, a different kind of trade flourished. Brothels stood as the symbol of desires and needs of a majority male population. Prostitution was an undeniable part of the frontier lifestyle due to a severe gender imbalance. In the mid-19th century, the settler camps faced a severe shortage of women, with men accounting for nearly 93% of the population in places like California. It was kind of ironic that while virtuous women had little to no rights, the so-called ladies of easy virtue enjoyed a surprising degree of freedom. In a society where property ownership was denied to women, those who engaged in prostitution flourished. They earned far more than the ordinary workers, allowing them rights and freedoms. In towns like Helena, prostitutes held banking credits and owned real estate. MATTIE Silks, for example, gathered a staggering fortune, earning $38,000 in just 3 months running a brothel. But as the number of women increased, the status of those dirty doves began to decline rapidly. Prostitution had become an extremely horrific profession, with women facing not only physical dangers like violent men, but also the risks associated with childbirth, sexually transmitted diseases, or general illnesses like tuberculosis. And once their youthful looks faded, they were thrown out into the unforgiving streets, left to face poverty and death. Amidst the stories of financial success, there were heartbreaking tales of young women trapped in this profession. Their lives were marked by inconsistent relationships, temporary moments of love, and a constant struggle to survive. Tragically, some women met their end through suicide due to heartbreak or their traumatic lives. Then came the presence of state laws aimed to regulate and punish prostitutes and brothel keepers, and fines were imposed each month. Many women also found themselves drawn to prostitution after being deserted by their husbands with no financial support, such as MATTIE Baylock, who turned to prostitution after her husband pursued a relationship with a saloon girl. The prostitutes of the Wild West were both survivors and victims of a society that exploited their bodies while denying them dignity and respect. Conflicts were often resolved through the barrel of a gun. Duels and shootouts became a symbol of the frontier's violent nature. Dueling, with its ideas of honor and personal reputation, captured the imagination of many in the Wild West. It was a means to settle disputes, real or invalid, and assert one's dominance. The duels did not have any formal rules, and the outcome often relied on a quick draw and a steady aim. During duels, there was no honor at all. One of the parties could shoot first at any moment, at will, or even just shoot the opponent in the back. Friends could also come to the duel, and then chaos would erupt. In essence, it was more like a minor war. One of the most infamous gunfights in the Wild West was the gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona. This showdown involved the Earp brothers, Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan, and their friend Doc Holliday, facing off against a group known as the Cowboys. The Earp brothers were a part of the town's law enforcement, yet had reputations for power and brutality. On the other side were the Clantons and the McClorys, the Cowboys, known for their involvement in cattle rustling, theft, and murder. On the morning of October 25, 1881, Ike Clanton and Tom McClory entered Tombstone, where they had several violent encounters with the Earps and Doc Holliday. On October 26th, the Earps and Holliday spotted the 5 members of the Clanton-McClory gang in an empty lot behind OK Corral. In a matter of seconds, the infamous gunfight erupted, with approximately 30 shots fired. While the exact details of the shootout remain debated, it is widely reported that Virgil Earp fired the first shot, striking Billy Clanton. Simultaneously, Doc Holliday unleashed a shotgun blast into Tom McClory's chest, and amidst the chaos, that's when the rest of the men's bullets went flying in all directions. When the dust settled, Billy Clanton and the McClory brothers lay dead, while Virgil and Morgan Earp and Doc Holliday sustained injuries. But the gunfight at the OK Corral was just one of many clashes. These shootouts were often driven by personal vendettas, territorial disputes, or clashes between rival groups. And they were not just limited to the lawmen and the outlaws. Sometimes, even ordinary citizens were forced into this violence to protect their lives and honor. In fact, most duels were the result of drunken disagreements in taverns.
I got a better idea.
No! Ah!
Outlaw gangs roamed the Wild West, spreading fear and chaos wherever they went. These gangs, driven by a thirst for wealth and power, carried out a range of diabolical activities like killings, robberies, and gunfights that struck at the heart of the frontier society. Among these infamous gangs was the James Younger Gang, led by the notorious brothers Frank and Jesse James, And with the younger brothers, Cole, Bob, and Jim, this gang embarked on a relentless spree of train and bank robberies. One of their most daring and infamous heists, the robbing of the First National Bank of Northfield, Minnesota, shocked the nation and highlighted the shameless nature of these outlaws. Their criminal activities extended far beyond this single incident, as they were responsible for over 20 bank and train robberies and a countless loss of lives. The gang earned a fearsome reputation which grew with each successful robbery. By the end of their career, the James Younger gang had stolen an estimated $200,000, an insane amount for that period of time. Amongst these outlaw gangs, another cruel one stood out: the Wild Bunch. Led by Butch Cassidy and his partner, the Sundance Kid. The Wild Bunch was known for their daring train and bank robberies, which made them significant sums of money. But what set the Wild Bunch apart was their commitment to violence. They showed little hesitation in resorting to extremely violent measures to protect their interest and escape capture. The gang's exploits reached their peak during the early 1900s. But their reign of terror eventually came to an end. In 1908, law enforcement hunted down and killed several members of the Wild Bunch in a dramatic shootout. The Wild West had also become a ground for quack doctors and snake oil salesmen. These were deceiving individuals posing as doctors, exploiting people for money. As settlers faced various illnesses and injuries, their desperation for cures made them vulnerable to such medical practices, which had an intense impact on people's health. And due to the absence of well-regulated medical institutions and qualified practitioners, fraudsters seized the opportunity. One of the biggest examples of medical quackery was the sale of snake oil as a remedy for illness. Snake oil salesmen would travel from town to town, offering their magical potions to cure everything from common colds to life-threatening diseases. They promised to remove pain and restore health, exploiting the desperate and vulnerable. These potions often contained nothing more than alcohol or ineffective herbal ingredients, offering no real value. But snake oil wasn't the only fraudulent remedy, because quack doctors employed a range of treatments, from questionable herbal remedies to bizarre medical devices. For instance, the use of electrotherapy was a popular scam where they would pass electrical currents through the body to cure various illnesses. Patients would be subjected to horrific electrical devices, often resulting in serious pain and even death, but no actual medical benefit. The consequences of medical quackery was devastating. People's health was put at risk and countless lives were lost. As we conclude our journey through the feral kingdom of the Wild West, we've just gotten a glimpse into the diabolical acts that took place. So, stay tuned for more captivating tales and keep watching for more captivating videos from our channel.